Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at a couple of polls that dropped over the past few days. We've got Ohio governor lined up, but first we're going to take a look at the Senate in Michigan. So we'll get to the poll in just a minute, but this article from Semaphore outlines the status of that race. And you can see right here, Pete Buttigieg is one of the highest profile names that may enter this race. Now the reason he might get into this is because it's now an open seat after we recently heard that Gary Peters is not going to run for a third term. That was kind of a surprise. So Republicans haven't won a Senate seat here in decades, and Democrats cannot really afford to lose this seat. But is Buttigieg the right guy to secure this seat for the Dems? Well, he's certainly a high-profile candidate and a national figure. A lot of Democrats love him, but I think his appeal is more with the consultant class and the college-educated voters. Some people think he speaks similar to Obama, but he does have some drawbacks. First of all, I don't think he's really the populist jolt to the system that I think Democrats need. But the bigger issue is he's only recently from this state. Up until 2 or 3 years ago, he lived in Indiana where he was born. We know he was also the mayor of South Bend. So these are two neighboring states. There's some rivalry between them. And Buttigieg was unable to win any statewide races in the red state of Indiana. So he moves to Traverse City, and now he might try his luck there. So if the primary field gets crowded, even though Buttigieg has very high name ID, other Democrats are easily going to be able to make the claim that Buttigieg is just a carpetbagger. Loyalty to the state and one's residency has frequently come up in a bunch of different races. We've seen Mitt Romney bounce around to different states. Plenty of accusations with Dr. Oz, even going back to Al Franken in Minnesota. Then there's Scott Brown, who went to New Hampshire. So that kind of thing does happen. But I personally would think Democrats would be better suited to pick somebody other than Buttigieg if they definitely want to hold this seat. Now let's get into this poll. And this is from Blueprint Polling. And given this time of the year where we're way before any actual elections, a lot of times you're going to get smaller sample sizes and you're going to get more partisan pollsters and sponsors. So keep that in mind. This was just with Democratic primary voters using SMS, and the sample size was 536. So that's not the greatest methodology, but it's something. So of the potential candidates listed here, Pete Buttigieg and Attorney General Dana Nessel have name IDs above 80%. That's great if you're considering launching a statewide campaign. They've got favorability ratings here. Pete Buttigieg is at 77 favorable, only 11 unfavorable. The AG, Dana Nessel, is at 72 favorable. Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist is at 45 favorable, but 44% have never even heard of him. This is not some no-name Democrat. This is the lieutenant governor, and this is with Democratic voters, and he's a Democrat. Even with that, you still get half of them who don't even know who he is. I think that might say more about his position than the person himself. Then we've got Haley Stevens, a U.S. representative from Eastern Michigan outside of Detroit. Then you've got Hillary Skolton, also a U.S. rep from Western Michigan. And finally, Mallory McMorrow, who is also considering making a run for this seat. Her name ID is, of course, going to be the lowest, 74%, no idea who she is. And all of them are young, under 50 years old, except for Nessel, who is in her 50s. So this poll says Buttigieg leads with 40% of the vote, followed by Nessel at 16. The rest are in low single digits, 30% undecided. If you're Buttigieg, that sounds great. You're newer to the state, you haven't even declared your candidacy, and you're already leading everybody else by 10 points. Then they go into some of the demographics. It says among white Democrats, Buttigieg leads Nessel 47 to 16 with no other candidate above 3%, while among black voters, Buttigieg comes in third with 16 behind Nessel at 22 and Gilchrist at 19. For those of you wondering, Gilchrist is black. Now this is a long-time issue we've seen with Buttigieg. When he ran for president, he did better with white voters, college-educated voters. Again, that more elite establishment class. But when it comes to black voters, his support plummets, and that is again reflected here. Buttigieg is strongest among voters with a college degree, winning those over Nessel 47 to 15. Liberal voters, he leads 47 to 18, and those who are not in a union 44 to 14. His lead is narrower, 34 to 18 among those voters without a college degree. Now, if Buttigieg is not on the ballot, then Dana Nessel immediately emerges as the frontrunner. She's going to be at 39%, and Garland Gilchrist is going to be at 9. 37% are undecided. And I think it's also fair to point out that Gilchrist has already declined to run for this seat. So if we go down here, there's a little bit more of a breakdown between the candidates. And then it does say here, without Gilchrist running, and he has announced he's not going to run, Nessel's lead increases to 41%, with McMorrow in second at 7%. That's also, again, without Pete Buttigieg as well. So then we've got the table right here. So just because Nessel and Buttigieg do have the high name IDs right now, there's many months to go. One of these lesser-known candidates could catch fire. They could get good fundraising. They could craft a unique message. And when you combine that with the national political environment, it could be an entirely different race in 6 to 8 months. So down here they have a conclusion. Scenario A is Buttigieg runs and he's the overwhelming frontrunner, but he does struggle with black black voters, and nearly a third of the electorate remains undecided. But his strength with educated voters and white liberals makes him the odds-on favorite to win the nomination. In scenario B, in which Buttigieg does not run it, then Dana Nessel takes the position of the frontrunner. So that's the early state of this race. And if we get on Wikipedia real quick and take a look at that page, then we could again go down here just a little bit and get a full list of the potential candidates. So there's a lot more on here than were tested in that poll. But personally, I think Democrats need to shake things up. I think they need to go in a populist direction. They need to go outside the establishment. I know that's a tall order to ask. The Republicans do a much better job of shaking things up. But aside from that, if you're trying to win in the general election, I still think Buttigieg is the weaker choice. Dana Nessel is already the Attorney General. That's a powerful position. She's going to go back to suing the Trump administration and continuing to make a name for herself. She might also have good suburban appeal, but I can't say I know exactly how strong she would be in the general election at this point. But I still think the accusations of being a carpetbagger are going to be the biggest thing holding back Buttigieg. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it has no effect on him whatsoever. But it does look like there could actually be a competitive primary this time for the Democrats in this Senate race. Now, we cannot at all forget about the Republicans either. There's a whole list of potential candidates here as well. These first three have already made runs to statewide offices in the past few years themselves. Tudor Dixon was the nominee for governor. She didn't get it done. Mike Rogers, he just barely lost to Alyssa Slotkin a few months ago in that general election. So usually I think going two in a row is not necessarily a great idea. And I do think going in a different direction is probably better for the GOP. Rogers did do better than I thought he would. Plus his name is fresh. Maybe he is the guy to actually get over the finish line this time. But the bench here for the Republicans is definitely weaker than the Dems. But Republicans are usually known for having these more contentious primaries. Seems like the Dems are more likely to coalesce around one major candidate. So this is going to be a great race in a state that Trump won. But again, Republicans have not won a Senate seat here in decades. So we'll be following it, but let's move on to Ohio. Now here's an article on National Review that sums up this poll for Ohio governor. And we're looking at Vivek Ramaswamy with a commanding lead. Now like Michigan, it's very early. Name ID is a factor at this point, but also similar to Michigan with the Dems, most of those candidates are young, in their 40s. And that's the same thing here with Ramaswamy in Ohio. He hasn't actually won anything, but he has made a big splash in the last presidential election. So in a sense, he is technically untested. I know a lot of people on the left despise this guy, but a lot of people on the right seem to think that he articulates the cultural concerns for their side. Plus, he's on Trump's good side, and he has a much more youth appeal to him. Now that it looks like he's coming back home to Ohio, and he's not going to make a run for the Senate, he's got his sights on governor. But let's get into this poll here, and this is from WPA Intelligence, and it was sponsored by the Club for Growth. Again, you're going to get some partisanship in these early polls. Now, the sample size here was 600 Republican primary voters, and they actually did live calls here. It was not just purely by text message. So where are we at? We've got Ramaswamy at 57%. That's significant. Dave Yost is in second place with 26. He's also the current Attorney General of the state. Then you've got Robert Sprague, who I believe has actually decided to run for Secretary of State. He's at 6%. Undecided is at 10, so that's not that much. Now, anything could change, but this could end up being another bitter primary unless Ramaswamy does end up walking away with it. We go down here, we can see that with very conservative voters, Ramaswamy is at 70%, and it's only slightly less of those that have a very favorable view of Trump. And if you're looking for name ID, Ramaswamy's is much higher than Yost's. That is a little bit disappointing there for Yost. Again, he's currently in office as the AG. You think more people would know who he is. Then down here it says if Trump endorses Ramaswamy in the Republican primary for governor, Ramaswamy's lead would surge to 47 points. That's plus 10 without the endorsement. So that's a bit of a boost, but it was already a significant lead anyway. So there could also be other candidates getting into the race as well. There's a whole lot of time left before the primaries, even filing deadlines. So let's wrap it up here and get back on Wikipedia and take a look at this race. So first we've got the Republicans, and Dave Yost already actually has declared he's going to run. Ramaswamy has an announcement pending that's coming up soon. And this is a red state. There's a whole bunch of other Republicans that could step into the void if somehow these two decided not to run, or even if they do. Also, I think it's interesting to take note here of Frank LaRose. Seems like he's been trying to get into a higher office for a while now, either the Senate or governor. But now apparently he's making a lateral move and he's running for state auditor. So I wonder if LaRose will actually ever get to a more significant office. A couple of early endorsements here for Ramaswamy, including Robert Sprague, who was a potential candidate in the poll. That poll is listed right here. But like the Republicans in Michigan for the Senate, we cannot forget about the Dems here in Ohio for governor. One declared candidate here, that's Amy Acton. I think people might wonder if Tim Ryan or Sherrod Brown could make a run for this seat. The state has moved pretty far to the right over the past decade, and given that it is an open seat and theoretically the environment should be a little bit favorable for the Dems, there could be an opening here for a high-profile Democrat to be able to capture this seat. It's not likely, but with well over a year and a half to go before the election, as I always say, things can change. So that's kind of where we're at in this race. It should be fascinating to see who's going to replace DeWine. I think Ramaswamy would be the favorite regardless. He could have a solid appeal in this redder state, but you never know, his appeal could actually end up being more limited. But that's a look at this Senate race in Michigan and this governor's race in Ohio. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about what's going on in either of these races? Is Pete Buttigieg going to run in Michigan? Is he going to clear the field? Is he going to be the favorite in the general election? Is Mike Rogers going to make a second run at it? And what about in Ohio? Is Ramaswamy the clear favorite here? What about Dave Yost? What about the Democrats? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.